This episode of Dorking Out is brought to you by
the Bailey Building and Loan Association, standing up for the little guy for over 90 years.
And the number 1. You know, they say 1 is the loneliest number, but if you're alone with an entire plate of Christmas cookies and a full Netflix queue, 1 really is the best number.
Houston, flight is go.
Mila, let's go. SPM. Safety contact.
From Assignment X, Amalgamated Storytelling, and thesoniashow.com, it's Dorking Out with Sonia Mansfield and Christopher Allen Smith.
Welcome to episode 27 of Dorking Out, a podcast for people who like to dork out about stories and the stories and culture that we love. That means movies and TV, books and podcasts, and pretty much everywhere and everything else where you find the stories that interest you. This is the Top 10 Stories of 2016 edition.
What a clever name.
Guess what that's about? This, with me today is my co-host and professional writer and author of the forthcoming Sonia show and frequent interrupter, Sonia Mansfield.
Hey there.
Hello.
With me today is my co-host, Emmy Award-winning filmmaker and author of the forthcoming Jet Jurgens and the Infinity Key.
Eat it!
Christopher Allen Smith. In this week's episode, we're going to talk about one topic about 20 different ways. We're sharing our picks for our favorite stories in entertainment and pop culture in 2016. But instead of doing a bunch of top 10 movies, top 10 TV shows, top 10 podcast episodes, we decided to put them all together in one podcast because we're super efficient like that. And it's not at all because we're lazy.
Nope.
We have a lot to talk about. So let's get this podcast started.
Only because we're mostly lazy.
Partly lazy.
Want more Dorking Out with Chris and Sonia? Well, there are a few simple things you can do. Share this program with a friend. We're assuming you have friends. It's easy. Just go to dorkingoutshow.com and you'll find our podcast links, our SoundCloud account, our YouTube links, our Facebook links, our Twitter links, our Tumblr links, and all our other links. And links. Grab one of those links and get to sharing. The more people listen, the more we make. Make all your friends envious with the cool podcasting choices you've made as a modern trendsetter. Our audience research shows the Dorking Out Show podcast audience is the smartest, most attractive, least prone to baseless flattery in the entire podcasting world. So get those links and get to sharing. Now, on with the show.
So that brings us to the only topic. When Sonia and I decided that we wanted to do a show together 40 years ago, we thought...
we met before we were born.
That's right.
Because we're in our 20s.
Sure, before we were born. Mm-hmm. We thought about just what would make our pop culture show, different from all the others. Well, after 39 and a half years of test shows, some of which we will maybe let you listen to in the future if you're very nice to us, we decided the things we love most were stories. A good book, a good movie, good TV show all had one thing in common: good stories. So now here we are with our first annual Top Stories list, counting down our favorite stories from movies and TV, books and podcasts. This might sound familiar to some of you regular listeners of the past year, almost all of which came out in 2016. And then at the end, we're going to talk about stuff that we really didn't like, stuff that we were sad to have watched. That's for all you German Schadenfreude listeners out there. I believe we have a couple listeners in Sweden, so hopefully that's for you. And I am not misremembering the language what is spoken in Sweden, but now that I'm saying this out loud on the recording, I'm pretty sure it's Swiss that's spoken there. I could be having a horrible, ugly American moment right now.
I think you are.
I gotta stop talking.
Stop
Christmas.
talking.
Sonia.
Yes.
So, starting with your number 10.
Okay, number 10 on my list is Stranger Things, which was the Netflix miniseries. Well, I guess it was a series, right?
Mm-hmm.
that was on earlier this year, was on over the summer. And this is a series that was basically made for our generation. A child of the 80s that mixed kind of John Carpenter, Stephen King, and Steven Spielberg in a perfect mix of suspense, horror, and adventure.
So, since you've watched it, I've noticed
Yes.
one thing in the stuff that I've done. Has it stuck with you? Have you thought about it over the year? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have. We have referenced The Upside Down many a
right.
time
That's true.
in this
Yeah.
house. It really has. I think it was I think it was really terrific story, and everybody was quite good in it, even the kids.
Right.
I'm really
Especially
excited
the
to
kids.
see
Yeah.
what they do next
That's
with
right.
the next season. I think it was a really great story.
That reminds me.
I really enjoyed it.
I made a prediction in that where I said Winona Ryder was going to win the Emmy for Best Performance.
Right.
And I
She-
forgot to check the SAG Awards when we did our SAG Awards segment to see if she was even nominated.
She is nominated for a Golden Globe.
Snap. All right. That's something. That's
That
on the
part
way.
I remember.
There we go. Look at that. I know.
You might be
something
on your
somewhere.
way.
That would be great. Not that I will remind everybody incessantly to
Right.
stroke my inadequate ego.
What is number 10 on your list?
Well, number 10 this year started out as a comedy, and it turned into a post-apocalyptic tragedy. Well,
You're talking about the presidential election?
kind of. I noticed this year and last year, I was starting to listen to more political podcasts. Now, one of the first podcasts I ever listened to was a political podcast. It was like 10 years ago. Not a lot of people knew about it, but it was kind of one of those early adopter things where there were not a lot of podcasts out there. So this podcast was something that I started listening to, and throughout 2016, as you know, more things were going on. I listened to podcasts on the right. I listened to podcasts on the left. I listened to podcasts all over news podcasts, kind of advocacy podcasts all over. After the election, which we don't need to go through here, I canceled nearly all of my subscriptions because I just couldn't take it anymore to all the political podcasts I was listening to, except I think one or two. And this one, after the dust settled, was still there. It is the Slate Political Podcast. It's hosted by David Plotz and John Dickerson and Emily Bazelon. They all used to write for Slate 10 years ago when this happened. The podcast kind of leans left. Slate is a pretty good journalism site that definitely leans left, but they respect facts. They respect, the practices of good journalism. So it's something that I really like and enjoy. And it's funny because over the years, Emily Bazelon's gone on to write for the New York Times Magazine. John Dickerson is now actually host of Face the Nation on CBS, and he has turned into or revealed himself to be a fantastic political reporter, but two, he is a really great presidential historian. And one of the things that I really noticed this year that really drove me up the wall is you had a lot of political reporters that were reporting on the race like it was kind of gossip. And John has a great way of reporting what's going on and kind of letting you know what's going on with the gossip, but always bringing it back to what is this going to mean when these people start passing laws. And he's got all of these great ways based on history to figure out, okay, if they're acting like this at this point, the presidency, it tends to make you more insular, tends to make you more paranoid, tends to make you listen to fewer people once you get into the White House. What does that mean for Hillary's personality or Trump's personality or this or that? So it's just fantastic, fantastic, fantastic. So
I have never listened to it. I think I should.
You should. It's actually good. It's every once in a while where you think, all right, they're all kind of liberal. John Dickerson's literally right down the center. It's kind of amazing. Anyway.
Well, I'm liberal, so I'm fine with that.
So you're going to love Emily Bazelon and David Plotz because they're both pretty liberal, but they got into, I think it was a year ago, they got into a thing about if you see a kid at a park playing alone, should you or should you not call the cops?
No.
Exactly. And it got into this whole
That's a discussion?
Well, kind of. And it got into this whole discussion of should you be a good Samaritan and call the cops if you see X, Y, or Z happening. And Emily Bazelon was like, definitely don't. She was like, don't trust the cops, don't do it. And at first you think, where is this coming from? And then she explains that once cops come into a situation, first, all the Black Lives Matter stuff, all of the shooting stuff we've seen. But then they are obligated to do certain things. And you think they're just going to take the kid, put him in the back of the squad car and send him home. Right. When in fact, that kid might get put into foster care because, and all of these unintended consequences. And then it actually went on for several weeks as people would write in back and forth. It was a really fascinating look on how do we as citizens interact with the government and what should we do and what should we not do. This is
like a whole other podcast. I'm like, I would love to weigh in on this, but I don't want us to drag the podcast out for 2 hours.
So Slate Political Podcast, it is a great mixture of opinion and real facts and a knowledge of history. It's fantastic. One caveat I would like to say, or not caveat, I would like to say, this is another way of me, this is another drinking game we're going to start, is me stroking my own ego.
Here we go.
As I was really happy to see that as Trump picked up steam, all of the guys...
That does not make me happy.
All the guys all the podcasters that I listened to on the conservative side, all of them turned out to be never Trumpers. So I picked right. I was happy with the Republicans that I was listening to because they were the sane ones.
Good job.
And everyone else jumped off the bridge. But anyway, that is a huge, long explanation for my number 10, which, get ready, this is going to be a 5-hour podcast.
Yeah, so much for the whole, I'm just going to do 2 lines each, Sonia.
I know. I said that to Sonia earlier today. I said, don't worry. We're going to make this fast. I'm just going to blast through it. Actually,
now everyone's going to be like, why doesn't Sonia talk that much? Because I only wrote 2 lines.
That's right. No, they know, Sonia.
Okay.
They just heard why you don't talk that much.
So my number 9 is also a podcast. No surprise here, of course. My favorite podcast is F This Movie. Mm-hmm. And one of their ones that they do, usually they do it a couple of times a year, but this year they only did it once. They do a Bond cast, so they do a James Bond movie. We talked about this last week or the week before, I forget. So they did their podcast on Her Majesty's Secret Service.
That was great.
And did you listen to it? I laughed ridiculously hard.
Yeah.
Their Bond casts are always my favorite, and this one did not disappoint. I feel like if you didn't laugh at their amazing George Lazenby impression, then you don't have a sense of humor.
That's right.
Hashtag, he had a lot of guts.
That's right.
So funny.
That's right. Oh, yeah. It's funny. I think I've talked to you about this before. I'm fascinated with movies that never get made, the greatest movies never made. And what's weird about On Her Majesty's Secret Service is it's probably the greatest Bond movie, and it did get made. The problem is
they made it with the wrong guy.
They made it with the wrong guy. Yeah, I'm telling everybody, a lot of Bond fans kind of are with me on this. If Sean Connery was in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, it would be one of the great movies of all movie history because it had 4 movies building up to it, 5 movies. 5 movies building up to it. It would have been this amazing, heartbreaking thing, but instead they got that Australian buffoon, and that's what we got. But
it is a really, really funny podcast. Their Bond ones always kill me. If you go back in their archive and listen to The Living Daylights, you won't be sorry.
Yeah.
But this one was really, really funny. And it's one of my favorite podcasts that I listened to this year.
Yeah, it's great. And we were very happy to have him on our show
Yes.
earlier this year. That's right. Patrick Bromley was on our show. And
that was definitely one of my personal, best moments of the year was to have him on the show. I'm such a huge fan.
which reminds me, we should call him.
Yes.
And guilt trip him into being back
coming
on our
on
show.
again.
So,
Yes.
all right.
What's your number 9?
My number 9 is a Netflix series called The Crown.
I still haven't watched this one.
It's good, but it's strange because I remember liking it when I watched it, but I was not like my doors were not blown off. It was just like, I really like this. It was created by Peter Morgan, starring Claire Foy and Matt Smith of Doctor Who fame, and it's about Queen Elizabeth II's first 5 or 6 years, I think, in power, and how she became the queen, how she dealt with her sister, and all this stuff. And it's an amazing examination of how family pressures shape someone.
Mm-hmm.
Because she becomes queen and is part of the royal family, so she's part of the the Windsor family that has ruled England for a long time. So there's the power of the state and the power of tradition, and all these things that we live with in our own lives, our relationships with our siblings, our parents, our aunts, our uncles, all kind of converge down to kind of change her personality in a sense, or put a lot of pressure on her personality. And it's just really fascinating. It's almost like a strange companion piece to Game of Thrones, because you got queens, you got acolytes, you got kings and old kings and treacherous kings, and she was supposed to be just this the daughter of a prince who, because her uncle did something crazy, all of a sudden her dad's king, and then 10 years later she's queen.
Right.
When she had when she was up until the age of 10, she had a completely different light set up, and because her uncle did something, it was just, anyway, it's fascinating. There's not a lot of people have kind of criticized this as like, oh, it's not that dramatic and it's not that whatever. I mean, it doesn't have car crashes, it doesn't have people poisoning people, it doesn't have big sword fights, it doesn't have nearly any of the things I usually like in my drama. Nobody gets shot. But it's just really nice, elegant, interesting filmmaking. I think it's been a little dismissed as like, oh, well, these people are just, if you want to see how rich people live and
right,
the problems that are not problems. Yeah, a little bit of that is true. But then when you actually watch it and think about yourself having to be in that position, where people, the eyes of a nation are looking on you, and they assume you have all this power because you're the queen. You can do whatever you want. Well, not really.
right.
So it's great.
Well, I should add it to my list.
So what is your number 8, Sonia Mansfield?
So I'm going to put this one very carefully out there. Number 8 on my list is female Ghostbusters. So I want to be careful here. The movie was not my favorite. I'm not putting the movie necessarily on my list. It's not one of the best movies of the year, but I really like the cast of the Ghostbusters reboot. Kate McKinnon, Melissa McCarthy, Kristen Wiig, Leslie Jones. I loved seeing female Ghostbusters. As a fan of the original movie, it meant a lot to me to see female Ghostbusters. I think the cast deserved a better, funnier movie. And, I didn't love the stupid sexist backlash that came with it, that really showed the uglier side of pop culture dorks.
Yeah.
But
what a strange year.
It is.
What a strange, now that we're 6 months away from it, what a strange reaction.
Right, to get so mad about female Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
I mean, in some way, it's almost helpful that it shined a light on like a dark area of the internet that people don't talk about, which is the online harassment of women. But I really like that cast. I wish they were going to make another one that maybe didn't need to have all that fan service in it. Like, we've already done a podcast about the movie, but I really, as a woman and a fan of the original, I was really excited to see female Ghostbusters, and it's one of my favorite things of the year. So it had to be on the list.
Cool. All right.
What's next on yours?
My number 8 came out all the way back in 2015. I am probably the last person on the Rick and Morty train. But
I have also never seen Rick and Morty.
Oh, Sonia Mansfield, you have got to watch this show.
Okay.
We're gonna have a link to the Hulu link in or the Hulu page. If you have Hulu Plus or whatever, you can watch all season 1 and season 2 of Rick and Morty. It is hilarious. It was created by Justin Roiland and Roiland, Roiland. Roiland? I guess so. Roiland. Roiland.
You don't take pronunciation advice from me.
That's right, or me. It was produced by Justin Roiland and Dan Tums. No, Dan Harmon of Community fame. It actually started out. Dan Harmon started a show in Los Angeles called Channel 101. It's actually where the Lonely Island guys got started. And this was a short. And what you do is people make a pilot, like a 3-minute little thing, take it to Channel 101. People come in a crowd, watch it, and based on who likes what, how many likes, how the response is in the room, you make another episode. So this is kind of this came out before YouTube, and it's still going. A very interesting kind of a crowd-sourced network programming thing a little bit. Anyway, long story short, they made Justin Roiland made a short that was kind of like, what would Doc and Marty from Back to the Future really be like? If it was, like a 65-year-old dude and like a 15-year-old kid going on like crazy adventures. And it was the original short. I didn't think that was that great because it was just a lot of kind of scatological whatever. But this show is so funny and so it is really kind of a philosophical examination of what it's like to the different choices that we make. They go into all these alternate universes, so they see alternate versions of themselves where they've done a bunch of different things, and then it becomes kind of an examination of existentialism and just all this stuff, and it is just very grim, dark humor, really, really funny, really actually kind of surprising, and actually surprisingly touching. They do a huge amount of kind of sci-fi trope takeoffs. They did an episode on The Purge that was just, oh my God, so funny. Season 3 is coming out, I think it's either in January or March. I've read several things on the net saying when it's coming out. But anyway, so that's the story there. So, Rick and Morty.
I'll have to add that to my list.
Unbelievably funny. Unbelievably good. It is dark, 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 but it's funny. So what's your number 7, Sonia Mansfield?
Speaking of funny, number 7 on my list is Full Frontal with Samantha Bee.
All right.
So during this unprecedented election season, and that's spelled UNPRESIDN.
Nobody's writing it down.
I'm spelling it wrong on purpose. She was the voice that I really needed. She was like my go-to thing to watch to react to all the craziness. I feel like it's a voice that's underrepresented on TV, much like Larry Wilmore's The Nightly Show, which I actually really enjoyed too. Rest in peace, Nightly Show. I think Full Frontal really picked up the best aspects of The Daily Show and The Colbert Report. I like that it's as hilarious and pointed as The Daily Show, but it also includes like a suggestion on how to direct your frustration to push for change, which I always felt like The Colbert Report did really well. And I just think it's just really, really funny. Did you watch? There was an episode last week where she sat down with Glenn Beck.
I've heard about it and I want to see it, but
it's pretty funny.
I have to admit, for me, she got like Jon Stewart kind of was at the end of his run, or it seemed to me, where he was more interested in the outrage and the finger pointing than actually being funny, which makes sense. But he just got a little too over the top for me. And I think she's a little bit like that.
See, I don't think so, but there might be a thing here where, because I'm a woman, I understand, like, I'm not saying that like men aren't as angry as they should be or something, but like there was like a lot of women in this country took it really personal.
Yeah.
What was happening with these results and the fact that we basically have like a predator elect,
right
now. And I think her frustration was our frustration.
Yeah.
So I found it very cathartic to watch her show.
Yeah.
And that word's going to probably come up again when I get to my number 6. But I think on top of that, the show was really funny. But I could understand why maybe you would say what you're saying.
Well, yeah.
Even though you're wrong.
Well, here's the thing, is I'm not going to lay this on her feet, and I'm not going to say it's because she's a woman, because I saw Jon Stewart do the same thing, because it used to be, when he started, he would go after the Republicans, but he'd also go after a lot of Democrats. But the main thing is he would go after the media. See,
I think she does go after.
She might, and I'll admit that
she did a ton of stuff making fun of Hillary.
Yeah,
pretty early.
But you
might be right. And then the later episodes, when the race was maybe closer than it should have been,
right?
She might have backed off of the Hillary stuff.
Maybe. And I've watched some episodes and I really like it, and it's obvious she should have gotten the show. She should have gotten that show. She should have been the Daily Show, main lead.
Yeah.
He said with
Lawrence. In a way this is better for her, probably, that it doesn't come with that baggage.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I meant to finish up with, is towards the end, Jon Stewart got really focused on it seemed to be nearly only Republicans and nearly only Fox. So his world kind of shrank down and he would get kind of more exercised. Right. And, a lot of what he was saying was true, or I thought largely true. But I think one of the things that I don't like when people are talking politics is I don't like preaching to the choir. I kind of like it when Republican tries to speak in a way to persuade Democrats and vice versa. And when you get kind of very preachy to the choir, it just it's not as much fun, which is why I really liked, up until the end, Stephen Colbert, because he would ride this perfect line of, he's a Republican, but he's saying things that Democrats will be happy with. But every once in a while, he'd kind of zip back and forth. And it wouldn't exactly be clear, is his heart in this bit? Or is he actually kind of letting a little conservatism come out? Or is he, just deep, deep, deep into character? There was this kind of, you never knew exactly what you were seeing.
Right.
Tightrope walk that I thought, and I just think Stephen Colbert, for me, unfortunately, not on his show now, he's the funniest guy of the last, since Dave Chappelle left the comedy stage. He's the funniest guy going. And
how did you turn my number 7 about Samantha Bee into Stephen Colbert? Jesus, how dare you?
I know. Oh my God. I'm sorry. I got to thinking about all these different things, because we talked about late shows and all this stuff, and this, this actually is a bunch of deleted stuff that I was going to talk about political podcasts in general that is kind of rattling around in my brain, and what you said. So yeah, I'm sorry, Sonia Mansfield. Samantha Bee's great. She should have had Jon Stewart's job, and she should be on 7 days a week. She's the best.
That didn't sound very sincere. What's your number 7, jerk?
My number 7 is, I think it's the only broadcast comedy I am watching.
Wow.
It is The Good Place with
Yes.
Kristen Bell and Jamil D'Arcy Carden and Ted Danson. It's created by Michael Schur, who has created a lot of good stuff. And it's basically the story of somebody that dies and goes to heaven when they should have gone to hell, but because of a clerical error, she's got the same name as somebody else who was supposed to go to heaven, so she goes to heaven in their place. And it is, the thing about, I wish I could remember what
that show is
podcast.
amazingly funny.
Yes.
I only watch 2 network sitcoms and occasionally The Simpsons, and The Good Place is one of them. It is just such a funny show.
What's your other one?
I watch Speechless on ABC with
right.
Minnie Driver.
That's right. Blackish. That's the other network sitcom I watch. I have not seen Speechless yet. I've heard it's good. I've heard good things about it, but
I am a big fan.
Yeah. So as we've talked about many times, it's there's only so much time you can watch.
Yeah.
But the thing about The Good Place is, Michael Schur, he worked on Parks and Rec and The Office, and he's got this really good way of being able to have really funny, sharp comedy that's not bitter and dark and mean and whatever. Like, he really is able to, his shows are really able to be among the sharpest things on television while still being very light.
Right.
And
like almost everyone has good intentions.
Yeah. And The Good Place is just really,
except for Adam Scott's character on The Good Place.
Oh, that's so fun to watch. To watch him, Adam Scott essentially plays the devil. But,
yes.
Oh man, he is so funny.
It is so funny.
He comes in. I think there's 9 episodes out there that we're also going to have a link onto Hulu for this. Ted. Also, it's fun to see Ted Danson back in network comedy, back on NBC. That's for all you Cheers fans out there who've been waiting and waiting and waiting for him to come back to NBC. Sonia Mansfield.
Yes.
What's your number 6?
Number 6 is another podcast, a podcast you introduced me to, the Dana Gould Hour.
That's
Specifically,
right, baby.
He did an episode after the election called Dog That Caught the Car.
Yes.
And it was all about him trying to process the election results.
Yeah.
And he did it with 2 guests. One was Eddie Pepitone, a comedian, and Mike Murphy, who hosts Radio Free GOP. And I believe he's a regular on Meet the Press.
Mike, actually, regular Radio Free GOP. Mike Murphy is one of those Republicans that I like to pay attention to.
Yeah. He's not a Trump supporter by any means.
Right.
But he offered, I think, real insight into the conservative policies that Republicans want, but don't support, like a predator-elect Trump's more extreme agenda.
Right.
And it was helpful to me, who's also really trying to process and understand how we got here.
Yeah.
It was just such a helpful episode. Like, I've recommended it to like countless friends where I'm like, this might help you. Like, the idea of like going out of your bubble, reading outside of, Huffington Post and MSNBC and trying to understand, like, 61 million people voted for this person. I don't believe that all of those people are horrible racists. There's something else there. And that's what they're talking about here. And they do it in a really smart and funny way that it's really worth listening to if you haven't listened to it.
Yeah, it is fantastic. And let me I'm going to throw a little plug in for actually Radio Free GOP is kind of on hiatus now because the election's over. But Radio Free GOP has maybe my favorite podcast intro of all time. So,
well, now I'll have to listen just to hear the intro.
It's a collection of a bunch of kind of movie clips and kind of like a radio. He kind of fashions it on kind of like a rebel radio station that's broadcasting from behind enemy lines. Mm-hmm. So kind of like we're the resistance of the Republicans that are true to the faith, and this guy's come in and conquered our party, but we're still alive and we don't believe all these horrible things, and there's still good in Republicans and all this stuff. And they have a lot of Red Dawn clips in it.
Okay.
And which is basically in Red Dawn there's the thing where in the 1985 version where the Wolverines are out in the cold fighting the Russians.
Right.
Their back is against the wall and they're listening to Radio Free America, and there's all these coded messages coming over, kind of like keep the faith, this is what you could do, and listen to these coded messages to figure out where you do your next attack. It's great. But my favorite clip is there's a line from Hunt for Red October. And it's the scene where Jack Ryan and the president and everybody are talking about Sean Connery's character. He's stolen this boat and he's stolen this nuclear missile submarine and is taken out there. And there's a moment where they realize the Russians don't know what this guy's doing. And one of the guys goes, "Oh my God, they've got a madman on their hands." But he uses that audio clip for Trump rather than so it's kind of like this horrible moment of realization of, oh, the person that's got the power in this position is crazy. And just hearing that come from a Republican point of view was just so sweet and encouraging.
I think that's why this episode was so helpful to me, because I actually don't listen to a lot of political podcasts. And I don't really read a lot of political news sites. So to hear like somebody on the right who's pretty moderate and talk about like his conservative policies, and because most of the time when you hear like things from the right, it's, they want to like make it so gay people can't get married, and we want a Muslim ban, like really extreme stuff that you're like, come on. So to here's somebody who just is like, hey, we need smaller government, or and it made me feel better.
No, it was good. It's Mike Murphy. He's one of those guys that I really like, and the Dana Gould hour, and that's one of the reasons I'm so glad that you picked this one, because Dana Gould is so funny, so sharp. He used to write for The Simpsons. He kind of wrote on The Simpsons in the last blast of the good years, which now that I think about it is 20 years ago.
Wow.
10 years ago. So that's a fantastic choice.
Yes. Thank you. I'm really smart. What is your number 6?
Sorry, I am just sounding condescending and one-uppy all day today. What am I doing? I'm sorry, Sonia.
I don't know. Have you tried drinking before the podcast? It helps.
No, I should actually.
I'm kidding. What's your number 6?
No,
but not really.
My number. This one I really like. So. We're going to talk about
as
this
opposed
later.
to the other ones. The other ones,
the other one's blah. This one's now we're getting into the good stuff. No, this one we talked about. We're going to talk about it later in our things that we don't really love, which is like reunions. You heard my thoughts on the Gilmore Girls reunion, and we heard your thoughts on the Gilmore Girls reunion. These things that you want to come back, so you bring them back after all these years. X-Files this year was another one of them, where these things that you loved years ago come back, and it's just not the same. It's just not working.
X-Files will be coming up a little bit later today.
Exactly.
This podcast.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I wish, I want it to be good. I want it to come back, but it's just not there. This movie, The Edge of 17, is like a John Hughes movie that was lost in the 1980s and then came out all of a sudden. This is like a perfect companion piece to that Say Anything, Breakfast Club, Some Kind of Wonderful, Pretty in Pink type of movie.
I need to see this one.
It's really nice and sweet, and it's actually produced by James L. Brooks, who produced Say Anything, and actually The Simpsons. Now I think about it, so he was on fire in the '80s, and he produced this movie. It's by Kelly Furman Craig, writer director, stars Haley Steinfeld, who is in another one of my favorite movies a couple years ago, the remake of
Pitch Perfect 2.
No.
Okay.
No. Close. True Grit.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah. So she is just, oh my God, she's so funny. And it's just the story of her life. She has a best friend. Her best friend starts dating her brother, so she kind of breaks up with her best friend, and she's awkward in it. And it's
her best friend starts dating Haley Stanfield's brother?
Yes.
Not her own brother.
That's right. Oh.
That's a totally different movie.
That's Game of Thrones will be up here in a little bit. Don't you worry. But, and it's just, that's the thing, is there's no real high concept. Is she's friends with this girl starts dating her brother, and she's having an awkward time at high school, and that's it. That's the movie. And it's just so perfect, so sweet, so sharp in its examination of high school and all that kind of stuff. And, people talk about, kids these days and whatever. This is exactly the only difference between this and 16 Candles is cell phones. That's it. Kids are always the same. It's the grown-ups that grow up and get bitter and start making things up and start blaming the younger generation. All kids are the same, and they've always been the same. Anyway, and this is proof of it, because Edge of 17 is just, it's one of those things where it's all about great execution. It's just a tender, sweet, funny movie, and Woody Harrelson as her teacher in this is some of the funniest moments I've seen all year are by him in this movie. It's great.
Wow. I'm going to put that on my list.
So, cool. So we're getting into the top 5, Sonia Mansfield.
We are. So number 5 on my list is this little movie called Rogue One. Perhaps you've heard of it.
No, tell me about it.
It's Star Wars movies, you guys. We talked about this movie in last week's podcast, so I don't feel like I need to go on and on and on. But I really, really, really like this movie. I'm looking forward to seeing it again. I think it's really great. I like this kind of darker, grittier Star Wars. It's not as fun as The Force Awakens, but it's a really good movie, and it makes me really excited to see what they're going to do outside of the Star, like besides just Skywalker family saga. Like, I'm excited to see some movies outside of that story.
Yes, definitely.
I would like to see some stories more removed from that even, but this is a good start.
Yeah, I agree. I would love to see this movie, and I've kind of, I think I'm going to say this upcoming is, if you have a great ending, you can get away with a lot. And
right.
This movie has an amazing kind of fan servicey, but still really good ending. And actually, I want to. I've had a thought since we last talked about it, and then we'll move on to the other one. I don't mean to derail all of your entries, Sonia, just most of them.
Yes.
Is it me or the Skywalker families on balance? Like, are you starting to feel weird about watching them?
About watching the Skywalker family?
About what? Because other than Luke and Leia, they're all murderers. And Luke might be...
Well,
Luke in Return of the Jedi...
I can relate to that.
That's right. How's that? What the... Wait a minute. Where's this going?
I'm kidding.
No. You finish that thought.
I'm joking. I'm
right,
joking
fine.
that all my family's murderers. Isn't that funny?
Not all of them. All right.
Not all of them, just 60%.
So there's Darth Vader is in this, and Darth Vader is doing Darth Vader things. All of the things you expected Darth Vader to do when you heard about him being super evil and awful, you get to see them here. That's all we're going to say. We're not really spoiling anything. You know Darth Vader's in it, and you know he's not going to be the good guy. That being said, so we have episode 2 where he murders a whole village of sand people.
Yes.
Then we have episode 3 where he murders a bunch of kids.
That's the worst thing ever.
Yes. Then we have Rogue One where, all right, you know what? I am going to invoke our spoiler sound.
Don't spoil anything.
I'm not going to spoil anything. You get to see him doing his stuff.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say. And it is horrifying. It is very freaky watching him full evil, angry Vader going nuts.
Yeah.
Then you get to see Kylo Ren in episode 7 murder Han Solo.
Right.
Plus murder an old man. So that's just the amount of people
Something's wrong in the gene pool in that family.
Something is really wrong with the Skywalkers.
Yeah.
And
maybe the Force makes you crazy.
Maybe it does. Because here's the other thing is, okay, Kylo Ren's not going to become a good guy in episode 8, probably. So he's still going to be mean. He's still going to be. So by the end of these 9 saga movies, we're going to see the Skywalker clan most of the time is murdering people. And it's just, I'm starting to get this weird feeling.
Yeah.
Watching, because it's kind of like, oh, Luke's the good one. But other than that whole family is just, you know what I mean?
Luke and Leia are the good ones, and that's it.
Yeah, they're the good ones, and then, yeah.
Well, that's just like me and my sister.
Which one's the good one there?
We're both, what I'm saying we're the good ones.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah, yes. That's what yeah. No,
yes.
I got that.
So I just want to say, this is a really good movie. It looks amazing. I think the story's really cool. It's got a great ending. I like the cinematography a lot. It is missing. It's missing that opening crawl and the John Williams score, but I really, really like this movie.
Yes.
And I was very excited to see it, and it did not disappoint me.
Yeah. It's a fantastic movie.
What is your number 5?
My number 5 is a semi-smaller movie, slightly smaller than Rogue One. It is David Mackenzie's and Taylor Sheridan's Hell or High Water.
I just saw this today.
You did?
Yeah.
All right. So it stars Ben Foster, Chris Pine, and Jeff Bridges. It is basically the story of a couple of brothers that rob banks in, the hardscrabble part of Texas to kind of keep their family farm. That's it.
Yes.
And you get all of that in the preview. And it's just the question of why they're doing what they're doing, how they're doing it, what people, who are struggling in this country. It does give a pretty good, as good as Hollywood usually does. We've had a lot of The Big Shorts or Margin Call. We've had a lot of movies that try to tell the story of the last 10 years of financial ruin from a 50,000-foot broker banker power level. This is the guy whose house got repossessed. This is kind of a Robin Hood type story.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
Like a Bonnie and Clyde. What's the one? Yeah, keep going.
And Chris Pine is a revelation in this movie.
Yeah.
I was
really good.
I had no idea that the dude who's been playing Captain Kirk is this good.
Yeah.
He's really, really, and I mean, Ben Foster's kind of always good.
Yeah.
He's kind of a weirdo, and it's kind of cool to see him in a movie where that finally pays off for him.
Yeah.
And of course, Jeff Bridges should be like in the Smithsonian. He's a national treasure. And Chris Pine's just so great in it. I was really impressed. It is such a good movie. Like if I made, if we did a top 10, movie list, like it would be in my top 3 for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It's really good. It would definitely be in my top 5. Now that you say that, I'm thinking, yeah, Jeff Bridges, he plays a Texas Ranger in this, and he's essentially a cowboy.
Right.
What I just want to see. That's all I want to see. Actually, after
you just want him to play a cowboy from now on.
I just want him to play cowboys from now on,
like Sam Elliott.
Yeah. Here's what we got to do. We got to get Robert, because after Robert Duvall was in Lonesome Dove, all I wanted to see him do was play cowboys. We got to have Robert Duvall, Jeff Bridges, Sam Elliott, and Kevin Costner.
How about Tommy Lee Jones? Can we put Tommy Lee Jones in there?
We could, but God, I'm over Tommy Lee Jones. But yeah, we could put Tommy Lee Jones in there. Maybe Tommy Lee Jones will be the guy they're going after. Maybe Tommy Lee Jones will be the bad guy. We just need a cowboy movie with all those people in it. Sorry, I don't mean to digress. But yes, they are all fantastic. And thanks for saying that, Sonia. I think that this is Chris Pine finally being like, I am a serious, really good actor. Because he's been in the Jack Ryan movies. He's been in some, Unstoppable, that train movie. He's been in stuff and he's been enjoyable in all of them.
But you're, every time you see him, you're like, whatever.
Yeah, kind of,
Chris Pine, he's like, man, like, he's not one on the Freddie Prinze Jr. scale.
Yeah,
but he doesn't always leave like some great impression either. This was the first movie I saw him in that I was like, hot damn, someone can act.
Yeah, he's really, it's really good. It's just a really, I am not huge into message movies. I mean, that's the problem is there are few things worse than a message movie that misses the mark.
Yeah.
But there are few things better than a message movie that nails it.
Yeah.
And this one really nails it.
And it's really telling a story that's just, these stories are ignored.
Yeah.
They're hard to tell. They're not sexy. I enjoy all the, there's just all these nice character moments in there and like smaller characters, like the waitress who works at the diner that he leaves a really big tip for her,
Right.
Like there's all this just like little stuff.
Yes.
That means something, that all adds up to something really big.
Yeah.
And it's just I was really, really blown away when I knew I would like it because I read a review and, I know that like it was a well-received movie, but I had no idea how much I would really, really like it.
Yeah. Yes. And actually that reminds me of something because you're right. All of Hollywood doesn't tell these kinds of stories anymore, this is almost kind of like the flip side of the Trump phenomena in a way, in that Hollywood used to tell the stories of working people, working class people doing work. And now I am happy with a lot of the big spectacle movies, but they don't tell, like back in 84, 85, Michael Keaton in Gung Ho, that kind of movie, or like Norma Rae's or whatever, where it's like regular people, the stories are about them trying to do good, support their family, and what it's like for people without a lot of power that work real hard and are trying to do the right thing, kind of navigate. There's a huge fascination with that and a huge empathy that a lot of audiences have for it. And that's one of the things I don't understand why Hollywood is kind of walking away from these kinds of movies. Because people, when they come out, people love them, but they don't, and that's one of the ways where Hollywood kind of is and isn't liberal, is they pay all this lip service to the working man and the downtrodden and the whatever, but do they make stories about them? Not really.
Not really.
Not
serious stories.
Yeah, not serious stories, and they don't, so when something like this comes out, and it's got a little sprinkling of bank robberies and all that kind of stuff, so that's fun.
But But these are the kind of stories that people can I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, no, keep going.
That people can watch and you have some empathy.
Yeah.
You know, these are the kind of stories that can change people's minds.
Yeah. Yeah.
And change behavior and make you see things in a way you didn't see them before.
Exactly.
And it's sad that there aren't more of these kinds of movies.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's what it is. We were talking about this with Bad Moms a couple months ago. And I was talking about how comedies have this kind of Hollywood sheen over them, where their house is too good, their job is too cool. That's the image that's pretty much the only image of working people that Hollywood has now, where they're not really working people like you and I know them. They're really actually upper middle class, upper class people. You know, they're the managers at the cool startup. They've got the 2-story house with the picket fence and and the good school district, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But they're portraying it in those movies of, oh, these are just hardworking people and moms that are struggling or whatever. So then when you see a movie like Hell or High Water that is shot on location, not on a backlot, in Texas, it's like, it's almost shocking to see what real people live like in real houses in these real small towns where, there's nothing sexy about them. There's nothing cool about them. It's just, and there's a trillion of these small towns in America. And I just wish that they would make more movies like that.
There is another movie that's winning awards and making top 10 lists right now that it's not about the same thing, but it has that kind of, it's telling a story that isn't told very often, and that's Moonlight. It's a really great movie with some really great performances, but it is like telling those kind of stories that don't get told very often. It's a really great movie. It didn't make this list because when I get to my number 1, you'll see why. But it's a terrific movie.
Cool. All right. What is your number 4? Number 4.
Sonia didn't have room for Moonlight on her list because she put number 4 as the Wonder Woman trailers. What a jerk.
Oh. Yeah.
I am ridiculously excited for the Wonder Woman movie in the new year. I love all the Marvel movies. I think they're super fun, but they are seriously lacking in female superheroes. We have Black Widow. She's not really a superhero,
Yep.
So when I saw that first trailer for Wonder Woman, I was just like, yes, finally, and I'm going to talk about this more in next week's podcast because we're going to do what we're looking forward to in 2017. But watching the 2 Wonder Woman trailers, they're definitely some of my favorite pop culture moments of the year.
Cool.
Was watching the Wonder Woman trailers. I'm ridiculously excited. It looks like it's Wonder Woman. It's like DC's Captain America.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I love the Captain America movies. I'm really excited. That's another one with Chris Pine.
Yeah, there he is. Chris Pine.
Well, there you go.
I'm going to reserve judgment, not because it's Wonder Woman, but because the DC cinematic universe is really having a hard time. And the more I hear about behind the scenes stuff going on with the Flash and maybe
I hope
Batman,
this movie doesn't let me down.
Yeah, well,
I have to say, I haven't seen a ton of the DC movies, and we're going to be talking about one of them a little later in this podcast. But
yeah,
I think these trailers look really great, and I'm really excited to see the first real female superhero movie.
That would be cool. I hope you're right. I hope they turn it around. That, you know what, we'll talk about. That's all I'm going to say. I hope you're right. I'm with you. My heart's with you. My head is pretty nervous.
Okay. What is number 4 on your list?
Great endings. We talked about this with Rogue One. For me, I think we're in an era now where not only do shows have to be little movies punched out every week. That shows, especially shows with this kind of impact, have to have a great, satisfying, tying up ending to kind of set that show among the pantheon of greats. For a long time, I think Game of Thrones was threatening to just bleed off in all directions. The characters were going off in all different directions with not even a hint about how they were going to come back together and how this huge, sprawling story was going to wrap up. Well, in this year's season of Game of Thrones, there was a lot of spectacle, a lot of, grim examination, what the show is known for, the grim examination of little people living in a world where, you know what? Yeah, actually, now I think about it, maybe Game of Thrones is kind of a working woman's show.
I should mention Game of Thrones is number 3 on my list.
Oh,
so we
that's
can,
right.
No, and it's number 4 on yours, so we can kind of do this together.
Okay, yeah, let's do this together. Basically, Game of Thrones is starting to exhibit the foundation of a great, or at least a satisfying, thematically satisfying ending. So there were 2 hours. There was the why don't you start talking about it a little bit?
I was just going to say, well, what I wanted to mention was I feel like this past season of Game of Thrones was its best yet.
Yes.
I feel it spent all of its other seasons kind of lining up all these pieces.
Yes.
Just lining everything up. And it all came together really epically in the final 2 episodes of the season. And it just, for me, established the show as one of the greats.
Right.
Like, when the season finale aired and it was over, I was like goosebumps, like ran into the other room to tell David, like, I just finished watching like the best show ever. It's Game of Thrones is one of the best. Like, I just think it was just amazing. Like, because for like so many seasons, there's all these plates spinning, and to see them like get everything all together to set up. Well, I guess they're doing 2 more seasons, but they're like, it's really 1, but they're dividing it up. Really, just incredible. The huge battle, what did they call it? The Battle of the Bastards.
Yeah,
that's episode
9. Yeah, second to the last.
That one's bananas.
That one
like
was
some of the most gruesome, like horrific war.
Yeah.
Battle, fighting I've seen.
Yeah.
In a really long time, and the season finale, of course, was just
Cersei Lannister
off the hook,
pulling a Michael from The Godfather.
She really did,
taking out all of her enemies at once. That's the thing, and it's funny because you and I have kind of turned The Walking Dead into a running joke.
Yeah,
about how it's grim, it's dark, it's depressing, it's thankless. Game of Thrones is guilty of all of that. The difference is Game of Thrones is like that for a purpose, to a specific end. It's a philosophical examination about the hard aspects of being a person and not having power and having to make your way through the world and the compromises you have to make, and just it is grim and dark.
Yeah.
But it's meaningful, and it's got characters that are colorful and interesting. Well,
the characters in Game of Thrones behave the way they do consistently.
Right.
Whereas Walking Dead characters behave the way they do because that's what the story needs them to do.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
and it's really frustrating show.
Yeah. So I hear, because I don't watch it anymore, suckers!
Well, I don't watch it anymore either, but it's one of the many, many reasons I stopped watching. So I'm glad that Game of Thrones was on your list.
Yes.
Because it is one of my favorites, too.
Yeah, it was definitely... It's one of my... I've really liked it in a genre kind of way, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later. But it's turning into the show that I think everybody kind of hoped or wanted. I think it really is turning into a great show.
I think so too.
which is going to sound ridiculous. People are going to, I can imagine people hearing this right now. Oh, thanks, Chris. Game of Thrones is a great show. Thanks for letting me know.
Thanks for the tip.
Thanks for the tip, jerk. But it is.
So number
heard-
3 on my list was Game of Thrones. So
All
now we
right.
can go to number 3 on your list.
What was, yeah, so we did number 4 on your list, right? Okay. So 3.
Yeah.
So you only have 2 left, right? Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I got it. Let's see. I'm almost paying attention.
almost.
So wait a minute. So how is it that we did this? By me giving my number 4, I took your number 3, so now I get to have kind of 2 in a row?
Yeah. It's what you wanted. Just admit it.
I'm not going to be happy until I'm saying 80% of the words on this podcast.
Too late.
We're almost there. No. So my number, and okay, I'll say it like this. My number 3, I've said it before, but when I was kind of writing out my thoughts for this movie, my ideal movie would be The Godfather with spaceships. It would be, on one level, a huge, fun spectacle, and on another level, a deeper examination of, what we are as humans. And, instead of people getting into arguments, they get into big, explosion-filled fist fights and gunfights and whatever. That's what I want. One of the things I've liked about the Marvel movies is they are all consistently at a certain level of quality. They're fun, they're good, they're enjoyable, but unlike The Dark Knight or whatever, I mean, some of the DC movies I think hit a higher high, but they also threaten a lower low, like Batman and Robin.
Yeah.
I didn't think until now that we had a truly great Marvel movie. And I still don't think we have a truly great standalone Marvel movie that is all compact in 2.5 hours that tells a great story to that level of greatness, to like a Godfather or a Dark Knight level of greatness. But for me, Captain America Civil War kind of built to that level, having watched all the previous ones. One of the things that I think, a lot of people complain about superhero movies and comic book movies and all this kind of stuff, and it's just a bunch of punching and hitting. And in some ways, they're correct. But in another way, one of the interesting things that's kind of been going on in the background of these Marvel movies since the first Iron Man is Tony Stark's journey of, I'm going to put myself out there. I'm going to take the weight of doing the right thing and making sure things go right. A real superhero mantle on his shoulders. And it's kind of evolved, and then he's done certain things. And by this point, we've seen him almost get nuked. And he was the guy that saved New York City in the Avengers and came very close to having that whole city nuked on his watch. Then he tries to, he has PTSD in the next movie, Iron Man 3. Then he tries to create this supercomputer that will keep the world safe for us, which turns out to nearly destroy the world and destroy this whole city or pretty much this country. Sokovia, it's a real country. Look it up. So as these things have gone on, he's kind of trying to do the right thing and trying to be a hero, even while he's this kind of wise ass, detached, ironic kind of persona. But it's getting worse and worse and worse for him. And it's interesting to watch him deal with failing as a superhero, even while most of the whole world applauds him. So in Captain America Civil War, he is shell-shocked. He's wrecked. He's doubting himself. And so the story kind of becomes him versus Captain America. He thinks that superheroes should be managed, should be controlled. The government should have a say in what superheroes do. Captain America thinks, no, we should all be individuals, free to do what we want. That's what we're doing. And it's a fantastic movie as a comic book movie.
It's so interesting that this comic book movie is dealing with these really serious, big subjects.
Yeah.
Like, this movie could have very easily made my list. The only reason it's not on my list is because I knew it was on your list.
Right. Exactly. This is in these Marvel movies, kind of in the background, and they've been clever about this, but I wish they'd be a little bit more upfront about it. Superpowers is a really problematic thing. It's not just whiz bang, Captain America swoops in and does the right thing. In Civil War, Captain America essentially sides with a murderer because the murderer happens to be his friend, while Tony Stark is trying to do the right thing, even though he's now succumbing to some of the powers that tried to control him, some of the governmental powers that tried to control him back in the early Iron Man movies. And one of the flaws with Civil War is the depth that's there to be examined, you can't really pull out, I think, as an audience member, unless you've seen 11 other movies to get the full impact. So it doesn't, I'm going to ding it for not being able to stand completely on its own in terms of a narrative, but for somebody that's watched all the Marvel movies and seen this kind of layer in movie by movie, bit by bit in the background, it's very satisfying. So from here on, I'm sure I'm going to forget this. Let's just all agree to call Captain America Civil War Iron Man 4 because that's really what it is. And if you look at it from that perspective, it is a much, much, much more satisfying movie, because if you meet Captain America at the beginning of Captain America, the First Avenger, and you meet him at the end of Captain America Civil War, he's nearly identical. He has not changed. The world has not taught him anything. He is the same person. Tony Stark has changed a vast amount in a very satisfying way. I don't think that's
true. I think I think Captain America's changed.
How's he changed?
Well, he's not all like, rah, rah, rah America right now, which he was at the beginning.
He's pretty rah, rah America. He's pretty... Okay. All right. Maybe a little bit. Okay. How else has he changed?
Oh, that's it.
All right. Sonia
he's got a new girlfriend. Does that help?
Does he?
Does he?
What's your number 2, Sonia Mansfield?
My number 2 is the same as your number 1.
All right. You know what?
So
have at it then.
Are you sure?
Yeah,
I don't want to steal your thunder.
I'm definitely, as you can see from our script, I have not much thunder there. I didn't write in a whole lot.
Well, so my number 2, I actually kind of cheated and I put these two together. So number 2 is Made in America, the O.J. Simpson story, and American Crime Story, The People versus O.J. Simpson. I think you can see why I put them together.
Because she loves O.J. Simpson.
I love him. He's so dreamy, you guys. No, what I loved about both of these, one is a 5-part documentary series, and the other one is, a limited series with actors that was on FX telling basically the same story, but very different ways. And even though they're telling the story of O.J. Simpson, one of the most famous murder trials in history, and it's been covered to death, no pun intended.
Meant it.
They're both stories told in a totally different way. In Made in America, I want to point out how amazingly difficult it is to make a great documentary. There's no script.
Yeah.
You're editing together interviews and archival footage to tell a story. And I think I can't even imagine the hours and hours and hours of footage they must have gone through to make a really powerful documentary.
Yeah.
That isn't just about a murder trial. It's about race relations in this country.
Yes.
It is fascinating. It's an amazing achievement. And then The People versus O.J. Simpson puts a human face on all these people who really just became caricatures, Marcia Clark and Christopher Darden and Johnny Cochran, with these really amazing performances by Sarah Paulson and Sterling K. Brown and Courtney B. Vance. I mean, just some of the best acting this year, period. Movie, TV, whatever, were by these three people.
Yeah.
It is. They're both it's so fascinating to me. I remember both of us talking about watching these, and we were actually worried, like, well, maybe we can only talk about one of them and not both of them. And
yeah. They're both fantastic.
Yeah.
I guess the only thing that I would add is OJ Made in America, the documentary, is kind of about America writ large, with O.J. Simpson being the thread that goes through it. How
right.
From, it starts in the 50s and ends in the 2000s, I think.
Yeah.
The People versus O.J. Simpson is kind of O.J.'s story. It really is focused around him and the trial. So they're doing two different things.
Right. But it also really shows like how we got where we are tabloid wise.
Yeah.
Like tabloid TV wise, court TV wise, sensationalizing murder trials, reality TV, all of that stuff. It all started with this trial. So it's really good stuff.
Yeah. It's both of those things are, there's a reason OJ Made in America. It's my second favorite documentary of all time, only slightly behind Ken Burns' Civil War. But it's amazing. It is what Ezra Edelman did, combing through all that footage and putting, because it's one thing to get, kind of gather all that kind of footage. It's another thing to put it together in a kind of cohesive way.
Right.
But it's an even third thing to put it together in the perfect way, rather than just cohesive. It flows like oil. It is so smooth and so good and connects up so well. I am really, really hoping, in a way, the Oscars are kind of on trial for me this next year, because O.J. Simpson has qualified for the Oscars, or should have qualified for the Oscars.
I believe it has.
They released it in terms of, they released it according to the rules to qualify it for the Oscars, but the documentary section of the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences is kind of a cesspool.
Yeah.
So who knows if they'll actually be allowed to get nominated, but they should, and this is important. It is fantastic, and it is thoroughly fascinating.
There was a thing in, I think it was episode 4 of Made in America, where he talks to, I think, one of the detectives, and he walks through what he thinks happened the night of the murder.
Yeah.
And it is the most chilling, awful, it's scary thing ever.
Yeah.
And then you see crime scene photos. It's awful.
Oh,
but important. Like, you need to see it. Like, this isn't like, oh, it's O.J. Simpson from The Naked Gun. Like, you need to see what happened here.
Yeah.
And it's a crazy moment and a really great documentary. And that's why it was number 2 on my list. And I'm sorry to steal your thunder of your number 1.
No, that's okay, because that's going to give me time to just talk about my number 2, which this might be the thing I've talked about most on this. Other than Rogue One, this might be the thing I have talked most in 2016 about, because
and he talks a lot.
Jesus. Yes, I talk quite a bit. You might have noticed that by now. But if not, keep noticing or keep listening. I'm sure it will come to you eventually. This is The 50-Year Mission, Mark A. Altman and Edward Gross's 2-volume oral history of Star Trek.
This is the first I'm hearing of this.
It is. That's right. You guys may want to go back and listen to our interviews with Mark A. Altman and Ed Gross. I believe it was the beginning of September.
That's right.
Sonia,
Or
technically,
maybe end of August.
yeah, technically Sonia Mansfield was in that episode, but I think I did almost all of the talking because
I asked like a question.
I was fanboy gushing on these guys. It was ridiculous. But the reason I am is because this is a little bit, and I've said this before, this is kind of like the Ken Burns documentary. What Ken Burns is to the Civil War, what Ezra Edelman is to telling OJ's story, Mark and Ed are to the Star Trek story. They tell everything in a masterful way from beginning to end, from Gene Roddenberry having the first idea for the first Star Trek show all the way up to J.J. Abrams and his crew working on Star Trek Beyond that came out in July of this year. It is the story of how pop culture, how filmed stories get made in Hollywood, how they were made in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. What it's like to work with actors, to juggle actors and their ambitions and writers and their ambitions and the constraints of television and studio system and all of this stuff, just everything you need to know. I've actually given, in my company, I've given copies of the 50-year mission to some of my interns and some of my employees as a kind of, this is what you need to know. If you want to make it in Hollywood, in this business of making video or making filmed entertainment and all the things you have to navigate, it's not just learning how to edit and shooting your thing and making your movie. You need to know how to talk to studio bosses. You need to know how to talk to actors. You need to know how to talk to, a million different people outside of the people on your set. And the stories of all that and all the greatest Star Trek movies never made, greatest Star Trek shows never made. There's a lot of that stuff in there. It's just, I cannot recommend these two books highly enough.
Did you like those books?
No, they're all right. They're fine. So, yes, Mark A. Altman and Ed Gross's, we're going to have an Amazon link in our show notes so you can go and get them. I listened to the Audible versions of these. This is how much I love these. I don't know if I've said this before. I listened to the audio versions of these. Then I bought the physical versions of these just so I could have them. Actually, I bought several physical versions of these just so I can have them and give them out. So, yeah, I've bought these.
I know
books
what
twice.
I'm getting for Christmas.
No, you're not getting anything. That's what you're getting.
That's terrible.
It's
but
awful.
I've been so good this year.
That's right. You've let me talk. So
yeah.
You've already got me my gift.
That was my gift to you.
And apparently that's the one I really wanted.
Apparently.
So what is
Obviously.
What is your number one, Sonia?
So my number one is a movie I just watched last night.
Hot damn.
And I am just high on this movie. I just love it. And it's La La Land.
I'm jealous.
We watch a lot of old musicals in this house, my husband and I, because we host a podcast. You may have heard of it, Old Movies, New Beer. We love to watch old movies. So we watch a lot of musicals in this house. And it's like this movie was made for us. Like, I love everything about this movie. The songs are super catchy and wonderful. I've been humming them all day. I want all the dresses that Emma Stone wears in this movie. I should mention, this is a musical.
I am very excited for this movie.
It stars Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling as like young lovers in Hollywood. It is very much a love letter to Hollywood. He wants to open a jazz club. She's a struggling actress. And it's a full-on musical directed by the same man who did Whiplash. I think that was 2 years ago.
Very excited.
The costumes are wonderful. One of the things I love about the costumes in the movie, by the way, is they're all like kind of monochromatic. Is that the right word I'm looking for?
No, chromatic,
Like
either one.
she'll wear like it's like a blue dress, a red dress. Like it just makes you feel like it's an old school musical feeling.
Mm-hmm.
The way that the costumes are, but it's set in modern times. I love the cinematography. There's a lot of like really long, unedited takes. Especially during the musical numbers. So There was always a thing in Fred Astaire movies where he wanted to be shot full body.
Uncut,
so that you could
right?
See,
yeah,
uncut. So you could see that he's really doing what he's doing. And they do that in this movie. And you could see that they're really dancing. And there are very clear nods to Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers and MGM musicals. It's a very sweet movie. It's sentimental, but it's not sappy. It's really terrific. And Emma Stone could probably win the Oscar for this. I'm not sure Ryan Gosling could win the Oscar for this, but I think she could. It's a really terrific movie. We've been talking about it all day in this house.
Cool.
My husband says it's probably his favorite movie that he's seen in years.
Holy cow. Don't pump it up too much. Wow. I don't know if any movie can stand up to this kind of anticipation.
There's just, by the way, I want you to, when you see it, we need to talk about it because there are like things about the end that I would love to talk about with you.
Cool.
So we need to talk about it, but it's a truly wonderful movie. It is one of those movies that, just makes you feel good.
I definitely need one of those now.
And I think we all need one of those right now. And I know that okay, so a couple of years ago, there was a movie called The Artist. Did you see that movie?
I did. I like that.
And I love The Artist. I thought it was really good. And it won the Oscar for Best Picture. And it was one of those ones where, I don't know, I think people are kind of over it now and we're like, it probably shouldn't have won. But the thing is, Hollywood loves to give awards to movies that celebrate Hollywood.
Yes, they do. There's a reason actors have a reputation for being narcissists.
Yes. And La La Land is really such a love letter to Hollywood that it's probably going to win a lot of awards. But I do really, truly believe that it's a really great movie. So I hope that it's not going to get this stupid backlash because it doesn't deserve it.
Right.
Anyone who bags on this movie is like someone who would kick a puppy.
Well, let me tell you what I don't like about it, Mansfield. I haven't seen it, but I've seen the previews.
I haven't seen it, but I like to kick puppies. So
I feel justified in saying that. No, I'm just joking. I'm excited. I'm very excited. Actually, that is a fantastic segue, unless there was something else you wanted to say about it.
No.
Into our New Year's resolutions.
Okay.
These are, now a lot of you are probably out there listening thinking, but they didn't mention this. And how could they talk about 2016 without mentioning that? Well, I'll tell you. There's too much stuff to watch. We can't get to it all. So...
Yeah, actually, I had a couple runners up of things that I wanted to kind of name check.
That's all right. So actually, why don't you name check this stuff? And then what we're going to do is we're going to go to our New Year's resolutions, which... says these are the things we haven't seen and we're going to get to them. Don't you worry. Top of my list on my New Year's resolutions is La La Land, which is what brought that to mind. But runners up for you, Sonia Mansfield.
This is things that almost could have made this top 10 list. Kubo and the Two Strings.
I have to see that.
My favorite animated movie of the year. It's a really beautiful movie. I highly recommend it. The Arrival. I super loved.
I need to see that again.
It's so good. I know you didn't like it as much as I did, but I really loved it. I already mentioned Moonlight. You already mentioned Hell or High Water. I mentioned Speechless, which I super love.
Yep.
And this one was technically 2015, but I didn't start watching it until 2016. Making a Murderer.
That's good.
But
good.
It was a really good documentary series. Like everyone, I was obsessed with it. It turned everyone I know into amateur detectives.
Yeah, so it's
You know,
not
we all
without its
got to-
drawbacks.
Yeah, we all got to play like armchair detective for a little while. And whether you think Stephen Avery is innocent or guilty, and I think he's guilty, it is a truly fascinating look at crime and police work and behind the scenes efforts. It's a really, really great documentary series.
Yes, it's good.
So
Which
I wanted
they're-
to give those shout outs.
Yes, they are working on a season 2 for that also.
Yes.
So that will be interesting. So
Yeah.
actually, what are your New Year's resolutions?
I actually only put 2 on here. I know you have a pretty long list, but mine are, I really want to start watching The Americans.
Yep, that's top of my list.
Okay. And I still need to finish Jessica Jones. I finally finished Luke Cage, so now I'm going to go back and I'm going to finish Jessica Jones.
Yeah, I can't remember if we talked about this on mic or not. I'm having a hard time. I really liked Daredevil season 1. And I liked the beginning of Jessica Jones, and I liked the beginning of Luke Cage. I even liked the beginning of season 2 of Daredevil. But one of the criticisms I've heard of these 10 episode or 13 episode seasons of these Marvel shows is they start out real strong, then they kind of spin their wheels for 4 or 5 episodes, then they end strong. And I've noticed that, and I've noticed, like with Luke Cage, like if it hadn't been for us talking about it on the show, I don't think I would have finished Luke Cage.
Right.
Because it kind of spun around.
Well,
for
I
a
didn't
while.
let that stop me from not finishing
That's
it till
right.
like last week.
And Jessica Jones is there. I've heard this is fantastic. I've heard it's great, but I kind of got into it, and maybe I'm just getting over the whole anti-hero grim thing. Having a hard time. But yeah, Jessica Jones.
Yeah. I actually still really want to watch Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. That's been recommended to me a lot. So
Is she
that
in
one's
that?
probably on the list. No, I'm saying that's on my list.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah.
What is on your list?
All right, The Americans is on my list. Search Party, a kind of
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
super ironic comedy on TBS. I've heard it's great. I haven't watched it. Night Manager.
That's
haven't
really
seen it.
good. I watched
I've
that.
heard it's great. Atlanta.
Yeah.
With the guy who's going to be playing
Lando.
Donald Glover. He's going to be playing Lando Calrissian. That's really funny. Kind of about a wannabe rap manager in Atlanta.
I
Really
watched
fun.
the first episode. Really good.
Yeah, good.
I need to finish.
Fargo season 2, which I suspect would be up there in my list if I had actually seen it.
So Fargo season 2 was on my list until I looked it up and realized it started in like November 2015. So I felt like it wasn't qualified.
Okay, so yeah, we got to figure out something
But
for those.
I super loved Fargo season 2.
This Is Us. That's a network drama that I've heard. I keep hearing a lot of people that I trust talk about it. Black Mirror, kind of a new century Twilight Zone type thing. It's on Netflix. Haven't seen that. La La Land. Haven't seen it. Moonlight. Haven't seen it. Nocturnal Animals. Haven't seen them. I hear they're great. Want to see them. Which brings us to the Schadenfreude portion of our podcast, where we kick around things that deserve to be kicked around.
Yes.
Why don't you start off, Sonia Mansfield?
Yeah. So one of the things I really didn't like this year was Suicide Squad, also known as Hot Topic, the movie.
What? Hot Topic? I guess it's been a while since I've been into a Hot Topic. How is that the Hot Topic, the movie?
You need to go into a Hot Topic and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
I am not going to go into a Hot Topic just to get that one joke.
I was so disappointed by Suicide Squad. Very disappointed.
Okay.
I think you maybe liked it a little bit more than me, but
a little bit, but it's definitely
previews,
faded.
I guess the previews got my hopes up.
Yeah.
And I was really disappointed. I just didn't like it, and it hasn't improved in esteem over time.
Yeah.
For me.
You know, it's funny. I think I did like it more than you, and I don't hate it. But for me, Batman versus Superman is an interesting, dark, not fun movie, especially for people who are used to comic book movies, superhero movies being fun and light like Marvel movies.
Yeah.
DC has decided
I didn't need it to be light and fun.
right.
I just didn't think it was very good.
Suicide Squad, right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't even see Batman v
Yeah,
Superman.
Batman v Superman. There's actually an extended cut of Batman versus Superman that is actually the much better movie. However, it is not for everybody, and that's what I think is kind of I'm trying to decide or trying to see if what DC is doing, if they're deciding to go in a direction that's not for everybody, but that will make their fans very happy,
Mm-hmm.
or if they just don't know what they're doing and they're spinning their wheels and they're cutting the movies behind the directors' backs, which happened both with Batman versus Superman and Suicide Squad, and I think both of the released cuts of those movies seem to be much degraded from what the directors were originally going for. And the reason I mentioned Batman versus Superman is Suicide Squad kind of had the reputation when it came out of, oh, it's more fun, it's more light, it's more whatever. But I don't think it is. It's completely dropped off my my memory. While Batman versus Superman is still there a little bit. But yeah, no, I hear you. I don't know, maybe. What was that?
I was just going to say, what's on your list? We don't need to spend a lot of time on stuff that sucks.
That's right. Well, they said as they went on to something that sucks, that's on both of their lists.
Yes.
The X-File revival.
You can talk about this one better than I, because it was such a mess, I didn't even bother to finish it.
That's good, because that last episode was really not good. So Chris Carter brought back the X-Files for 6 episodes earlier this year. David Duchovny, Gillian Anderson. The X-Files was kind of like one of the cool shows of the 90s. It was one of the shows that kind of opened the door to this serialized storytelling that we have on cable and in the 2000s. It's one of the important evolutionary shows in television drama. But it's almost like Chris Carter was frozen in ice at the wrap party for the X-Files, was thawed out in the middle of 2015, and then wrote and shot 6 more episodes. This is a show out of time. It is, they only had 6 episodes, and they were trying to cram in a huge amount of story, but it looks like if you were to take like a good Leave It to Beaver script now and shoot it with modern cameras.
We're talking about Leave It to Beaver.
Well, that's the thing. If you were to shoot it with modern cameras and a modern cast, but the same script and the same shooting techniques that they used back in the early 60s, it would look just weird. You know what I mean? It would just look off. It's like we're so far beyond this. It's kind of looks amateurish, but doesn't really look amateurish. It's this weird netherworld. Now imagine taking that Leave It to Beaver script, and it's like one of the Leave It to Beaver scripts from like the very end of the show, where the show is not firing on all cylinders. The creators are kind of tired and worn out, and they're just kind of over it.
Yeah.
Those are the scripts they shot for the X-Files reunion.
I was so disappointed. You know what? I didn't care. I didn't want them to do the mythology stuff.
Yeah.
I was like, I would have been happy with 6 like standalone, like kind of monster of the week episodes.
Yeah, or something. Or the thing that problem I had with it is they tried to do mythology episodes, but they only had essentially 2 episodes to do it. So they tried to cram in a season's worth of conspiracies and backstory and subterfuge and misdirects into 2 episodes. And that last episode was just a train wreck.
I didn't even make it that far.
Oh, it was just so bad. And, it left on this weird cliffhanger where the aliens have arrived and they're kidnapping people, I think, or something. It's just,
I can't remember.
I can't really remember. It was just so, and there's this pandemic that's killing all these people, this new Black Death all over the place. It's just, enough. So, revivals. Speaking of, this one I just want to kick around one more time. The Gilmore Girls reunion was...
Boy, did you hate it.
I think what's happening is I really didn't like it, but I didn't necessarily hate it. And
do you know what I love about the Gilmore Girls reunion? How much you hate it.
It's funny.
That's my favorite part.
Because here's the thing, is what I like about it is how much my wife hates it, and I think she's kind of transferred that hate to me in the intervening week since we talked about it. Because now I've actually gone to work and I've said, "Hey, have you seen the Gilmore Girls? Did you like it?" And one of the people that I talked to, Dirk Ducharme, I'm going to name check him on here. He watched the original show and he really liked it. And he, said what
I don't know if
said.
I've met someone who liked it.
He really liked it, but he said this is only fan service. And it is. And which is why all of you Gilmore Girl fans that are throwing your iPhones or your podcast players across the room right now when I'm kicking around your little show. Ignore me. Feel free to ignore me because this was not made for me. It admittedly wasn't made for me. Sonia and I conducted an experiment where she was a fan of the show, so she watched it. I was not a fan of the show, so I watched it, and guess what? The person that doesn't know anything about what's going on hated it.
Right.
So, but on that note, I'm going to close out my 2016 with this for you, Sonia Mansfield.
Okay.
I think I could make a case for this. We're going to see.
All right, I'm ready.
The West Wing and Gilmore Girls take place in the same fictional universe. I was listening to the West Wing podcast the other day, and they were talking about how in season 2 of the West Wing, when they were doing the episodes that flashed back to Bartlett's original campaign, all of those New Hampshire scenes, outside scenes, New Hampshire small town scenes, were shot on the Stars Hollow set on the Warner's backlot. So that actually is Stars Hollow in the West Wing.
That's funny.
So, yeah. It's not exactly a inside fictional universe kind of thing, but you can see Stars Hollow in the West Wing.
Everything has to have a universe.
It does. One of these days, I want to try to create a line of succession in fiction from like it would go from Jeb Bartlett to the president from 24 to Frank Underwood and then maybe Morgan Freeman in Deep Impact. Like the world gets wiped out. So, because one of the other things that's interesting for this West Wing podcast, now I'm just going to talk about podcasts I've listened to, is in the West Wing, Eisenhower was the last president that we know. Kennedy was never president in the West Wing universe. Johnson, Nixon, none of those were presidents.
Right.
They were all fictional presidents from Eisenhower on. I just thought that was very interesting.
You're boring me.
All right. Well, my job is done. So, you're welcome, people of Earth, for our podcast. We're very happy to have done this show for you for 2016. Look forward to 2017, where maybe I will get a word in edgewise.
Yes. Poor you. You're suffering.
And you might have some idea of what I have to say about certain things. But until then, Sonia Mansfield, do you have anything else you would like to say?
I will just say Happy New Year and goodbye.
Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and goodbye!
The Dorking Out Show is on Twitter at Dorking Out Show, where you can find Chris at Jet Jurgens and Sonia at The Sonia Show. You can read about Sonia's random adventures at thesoniashow.com and track the slow and creeping progress of Chris's novel and his other hijinks at jetjurgens.com. You can find out more about The Dorking Out Show at dorkingoutshow.com. While you're over there, you can support us by giving us a review on iTunes. We have a handy-dandy iTunes link to whisk you right back to 2007, where you can leave your review and 5-star rating in iTunes. We'd do it for your podcast. Want to dork out even more? Well, you can sign up for our newsletter, where you'll get all the headlines we use as fuel for the show. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening.